Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a tribute to my late father, Louis Hurwitz, who lived from 1935 to 2016. He was 80 years old when he passed away. And what's bringing this on, and I have to warn you, it's going to be a little sentimental and personal. So if that's not why you're here, then I can understand you wanting to see something else. But, my father was in some ways the inspiration for me getting into music, and in a very unusual way. And recently, my mother was cleaning out boxes of stuff that she hadn't looked at since my father had died. And she came across something very, very unusual that we really didn't even know still existed. They were some of my father's piano awards, his piano certificates from his days as a almost piano prodigy. I wouldn't say he was a major piano prodigy, but he was talented. And he played the piano, and he was forced to play the piano, and he hated playing the piano. His parents forced him to do it. And they forced him to do it for reasons which I don't really know. My grandmother, who was a wonderful, wonderful grandmother, who lived to be a grande dame of 103 years old, was not the ideal mother. My grandparents both worked. They were the children of immigrants, which is actually very unusual for Jewish families because they were all born in this country in the early days of this century. But my grandfather sold auto parts in Danbury to like Charles Ives, that Danbury. And he dealt in auto parts, and my grandmother was the bookkeeper in their store. And that was their life, was running this business and providing for their kids. And they really didn't have time for much else. But my grandmother wanted something, as she said, to make her proud of her children. And so she insisted that they learn to play the piano. And she was a tyrant at it. She would, switch the egg timer to make it seem like he had to practice for even longer than the regular egg timer would make him do it. But he was very, very gifted. And he won numerous piano awards. And I knew this growing up. He told me about it, but I didn't really know many details. There was one story, though, he always did tell me that was really wonderful. He was in a piano competition at Town Hall, is where it was, in New York City. He remembered those details, and he came with his father. They got their truck and drove down from Danbury, and my dad played the competition, and he came in second. And to hear him tell, he came in second because the person who came in first happened to be the student of the principal judge on the jury, which anyone who has participated in a music competition, piano or otherwise, will know that is hardly an unusual story, is it? But after the competition was over, he was approached by an elderly woman who invited him and my grandfather over to her apartment for tea and crumpets post-competition. And the reason, she said, was because she felt that my father really had deserved the first prize. And she was very upset by the judge's decision. So they went to her apartment. Now, it turned out this woman lived in the Plaza Hotel on Central Park South in Manhattan, in a penthouse or somewhere around there. Something like that, Central Park South somewhere. My father seemed to recall the plaza, but who knows. And he got to her apartment, and she asked him to play for her. And he did. And afterwards, she said to him, "I want to give you this piano." It was a gorgeous, grand piano. My father didn't have anything like that. And she gifted him her piano. He wasn't able to take it because they had no place to put it, but he was very touched. And he remembered that story his whole life and told it to me when I was growing up. My father, because my grandmother had pushed so hard, he grew to really dislike playing the piano and to dislike classical music, particularly because that's what his teachers were doing. He didn't hate the music. He hated playing it. And there were certain things that he really did despise. If you said what am I saying? Not William. If you said Robert Schumann, just plain Schumann, the name Schumann, to my father, he would turn green. He had a Pavlovian reaction. He would be, "Oh, God damn Schumann. I hated Schumann. Mr. Spritzenhocher, my pianist, damn it, he only forced me to play Schumann." Schumann was something we didn't discuss. He liked plenty of other composers. Tchaikovsky was always great. Schumann, not so much. That was something we didn't talk about. But I think the funny thing is, when I was younger and started studying piano, I wanted piano lessons. I wanted music. I wanted music desperately. And my mother was the sort of the classical music person in our family. She loved it, and I learned what I learned from her because she played it when she was doing housework and whatnot. She had all the records. She had the record collection. My father enjoyed it, but he wanted nothing to do with it because of the horrible experiences he had had as a child. He wanted to play jazz. He really, really wanted to play jazz. And I think that's what he really would have enjoyed doing. And it's just 1,000 pities that he was never allowed to do it. And so the bottom line was, I wanted piano lessons. And so my mother arranged for me to take piano lessons. My father wouldn't have anything to do with it. And eventually I gave up because, as my father said to me, he said, you're going to have to practice. You're going to have to practice a lot. And I'm not going to force you. I will not do it. I want nothing to do with it. And I was a young kid. And so, of course, at some point after getting through the basics, I gave up. And at various points afterwards, I took lessons because I felt guilty for having given it up. But without that friendly pressure behind me from my parents, it just wasn't going to happen. And so it didn't. It just never did. My career as a piano virtuoso never took wing. Probably a good thing because I was not nearly as gifted as I think my father was reputed to have been. And so recently, going through his stuff, we found these. These are his certificates from piano competitions that he was forced to participate in, much against his will. And I'm just looking at this. This is from the Music Education League Incorporated, whatever that was, awards this honor certificate to Louis Hurwitz, entered in the auditions of the season 1945-46. My father was 10 years old. He was 10, 11, in the sub-intermediate piano class, who received a final rating of 90 9/10%. Where did they get the 9/10% from? Where did they get the 90% from? And was declared the winner of judges' honors in the judges of the final audition. And here they are. They were Leslie Hodgson, Marcel Bild, and I don't know what this is. Raisa, she's Russian. Raisa Salentis, Greek, who knows? But here it is. This is the certificate from 1945, 1946. Right after the war, and my father participated in these. Here's judges' honors from 1946, 1947, and here's the piano students special class. He got 89% and won silver honors in this one, and I was so touched. I was so touched to see these again and to remember my father's stories of being forced to play the piano and hating every minute of it. And, when I started getting interested in music, it was very clear to me, because of what had happened to my father in his youth, that he was never encouraging, but he was never discouraging. You know what I mean? He always supported me in whatever I wanted to do. I never felt that there was any discouragement or disapproval in my desire to do music or to be involved in music in some way. But he thought that, or I knew really from a fairly young age, that if this is what I wanted to do, I would have to do it myself because I wasn't going to get pushed. I wasn't going to get that kind of support and backing. I had financial support. If I did something well, I had plenty of approval. It was an odd thing. It was an odd thing, and my father, in some respects, was a very private person in that way. He didn't want to talk about it, but every so often, something would happen. For example, when I started publishing books about music, and when I started ClassicsToday.com, and I did all these things around the music world. I had these ridiculously huge record collection, and I was a radio host when I was in college. I was director of classical music programming at WJHU in Baltimore, and I had a radio show on KDFC in San Francisco, and I was a guest in WQXR. I did all of these things around music. I did everything except play it, and except as a percussionist, which I taught myself to do, because I was at that point I was never going to have lessons. I played the clarinet, I played the viola, I played the piano. I tried to learn a little of everything, but that was all self-motivated, because poor old Dad was going to have an absolutely horrific experience if we got too much into the serious performance world. It was a world he wanted nothing to do with. And I can't say I blame him, hearing what he told me about it. My aunt, his sister, who was completely out of her mind, by the way, also told me a wonderful story about a piano competition that I thought I'd share with you. She was, along with my father, she was forced to practice too. And she remembers very vividly at one piano competition she was playing, her piece was the Ritual Fire Dance, the piano version by Manuel de Falla from El Amor Brujo. Now, those of you who know the Ritual Fire Dance know it just goes around twice. It plays and then it goes back to the beginning and it plays again and it keeps going da 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 da, da 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 da, and it keeps coming around like that. And in order to end it, you have to find the off ramp, because the second part's exactly like the first part. The only difference is it has an exit, and you have to remember the exit. She forgot the exit. And of course, when you play in competition, even when I was studying clarinet, it was the same thing. They teach you, they whip into you. Never stop. Always keep going. Never just put down the instrument and stop. So she kept going and going and going and going because she couldn't remember how to get out of it. And she kept saying, she said, I must have played it, she said, for 35, 40 minutes. It's a 3-minute piece, 3.5 minutes. I just kept going round and round. Finally, I looked up, slammed the piano, got up, and walked all the way home. And that was the end of her piano career, too. It was really something kind of unbelievable. And I think about how fortunate I was to have parents who were supportive of what I was wanting to do without being, stage parents from hell. I did it because I loved it and they were happy that I loved it, but it was up to me to love it. That was how it worked. That was my father's position. And I just, I remember him very, very fondly. I remembered how his love of music came out in interesting ways. One last thing, and then I'll leave you. One last memory I have that I just want to share with you, that it shows you, I think, how music can be so much a part of your life without it necessarily having to be misery. That was his real concern. He never wanted it to be misery. It should always be something joyful. And the way that I think he taught me that more than any other way is, I was a very, very sick kid. I had terrible asthma when I was young. I was in and out of the hospital. Doctors made house calls in those days. They would show up and give me adrenaline shots, which made me sick. It was awful. And when I was up all night trying to breathe, feeling really awful, my father learned to play the guitar. I had no idea he could play the guitar. I don't think he'd ever touched a guitar. But in I remember this like it was yesterday, in a very, very brief span of time, and I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. I had just basically gotten into a big person's bed, so I was young. And within a matter of, it seemed, days, he knew how to play the guitar. And he would sit next to me all night at night as I, lay there, and he would sing to me and play the guitar. And that's one of my earliest memories of my father, and one of my earliest memories of music. And I think that having that is an incredibly precious thing. And so I feel that I'm happy to have this opportunity to give my father the tribute that I think has long been coming. And now that he's gone, something that will allow me to talk about his experience of music without him, turning green and drooling. Although I don't know, he may be turning over in his grave because I'm saying this, but thank you, Dad. I love you. You've given this to me, and it's for that reason I can share it all with you. And that's about the story. Keep on listening, folks. Take care, and thank you for joining me in this reminiscence of my childhood. Bye-bye.